और क्या खाया है जो डकार मारा है? लगता है कुछ अच्छा खाया। ओके,
बटर चिकन।
बटर चिकन। अरे okay, so what is goodwill? Goodwill is the excess of purchase price over the fair value of net identifiable assets of the target. And why are acquirers willing to pay more than the fair value of net identifiable assets of the target? Because the target may have assets that are not reported on the balance sheet, right? For example, Pella, please write down. First, please write down target's reputation and customer loyalty are not reported on the balance sheet. Second reason is that the acquirer may be willing to pay more because of the perceived synergies from the business combination. And what are these perceived synergies? So, say for example, the acquirer may be able to eliminate duplicate facilities and reduce salaries as a result of business combination. And the third reason may be that target may have some intellectual property, some research and development assets that are off balance sheet due to current accounting standards. Right, so these may be three of the many reasons why the acquirer is willing to pay more than the fair value of net identifiable assets of the target. These might be the reasons why the acquirer may be willing to pay more than the fair value of net identifiable assets of the target. Okay, now guys, important point: goodwill is reported in the balance sheet only when one company acquires another company. That is when we use the acquisition method of accounting. So write this down. Goodwill is reported on the balance sheet when one company acquires another company. Or you could say that goodwill is reported only when goodwill is reported only under acquisition method of accounting. It's reported only under acquisition method of accounting. Okay. So guys, goodwill is not reported on the face of the balance sheet when we use the equity method. Though goodwill is a component of investment in associate, goodwill is not reported separately. Right? Investment in associate is reported as a single line item on the face of the balance sheet. Even though goodwill is a component of investment in associate, goodwill is not reported separately under the equity method. Right? The third is that the goodwill is identifiable, intangible, or unidentifiable intangible. Guys, please tell me.
अनआइडेंटिफाइड।
Yes, it's an unidentifiable intangible. Why is it an unidentifiable?
इसको सेपरेट नहीं कर सकते ना,
Very
मतलब
good.
ऐसे।
Because it cannot be separated from the business. It cannot be bought and sold separately. So please write this down. Goodwill cannot be bought or sold separately. And since goodwill is unidentifiable, it's not amortized but is tested for impairment. It is not amortized but tested for impairment. Okay. Annually. It's tested for impairment annually. Okay. Now, if impaired, goodwill is reduced in the balance sheet and a loss is recognized in the income statement. Impairment loss is recognized in the income statement if goodwill is impaired. Now this impairment loss, goodwill impairment loss, will it affect the cash flow statement of the company? Guys, is it a cash loss? No,
No.
it's not a
No.
cash loss, it's a non-cash loss. So goodwill impairment loss would not affect cash flow statement. Also, guys, very important, goodwill impairment loss is not tax deductible. It is not tax deductible, right? So even though even if this loss is recognized in the income statement, even if goodwill is impaired and we recognize a goodwill impairment loss in the income statement, income tax authorities won't recognize this loss. They would disallow this. They would disallow this loss, right? They would add back this loss while calculating the taxable income, right? So please write this down. They would, why they would, tax authorities would add back.
तो जो एनुअल रिपोर्ट वाला फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट बनेगा उसमें तो आएगा ना टैक्स
हाँ,
डिडक्टेबल।
प्री टैक्स अकाउंटिंग प्रॉफिट में से तो डिडक्ट होगा, बट while calculating taxable income, जो then the income tax authorities would disallow this loss. So tax authorities would add back this loss while calculating taxable income. Okay. Now IFRS and US GAAP differ on how goodwill is tested for impairment. So we'll first test for impairment, test for impairment of goodwill under the IFRS, under IFRS. ठीक है? So we'll first test for impairment of goodwill under IFRS. तो चलो ये करें. ओके, तो अभी तुम लोगों को लैंग्वेज पढ़ाते हैं. IAS 36 goodwill impairment. देखो. Now please understand what's written in the IFRS standards and then understand what we are going to, then we'll discuss what we need to understand, we need to study. ये वाला देखते हैं, IAS+.com, IAS 36. So basically International Accounting Standard 36 deals with the impairment of assets and impairment of goodwill. Okay. Okay. Where is impairment? Okay, impairment of goodwill. To test for impairment of goodwill, must be allocated to, please read this paragraph. Goodwill must be allocated to each of the acquirer's cash generating units or a group of cash generating units that are expected to benefit from the synergies of combination, irrespective of whether other assets or liabilities of the acquiree are assigned to those units or groups, and each unit or group of units to which goodwill is allocated shall report the lowest level within the entity. मतलब कुछ समझ में आ रहा है?
Right, which is
कुछ भी समझ में आ रहा है इसमें? हाँ,
so
पढ़ो ध्यान से, 1 मिनट लगा के ध्यान से पढ़ो, कुछ समझ में आ रहा है मेरे को बताओ.
goodwill must be allocated to each acquirer's. Okay. All groups of
This
cash
is IAS
that
36,
not
which deals with impairment of assets, in which deals with impairment of goodwill, and it has given this very difficult definition as to how to test for impairment
lowest
of
level
goodwill.
in the entity at which goodwill is not
Okay, guys. So the first
allocated.
thing that we need to understand from this definition is, the first thing that we will identify from this definition is that what is a cash generating unit. right? What is a cash generating unit? Okay, so let us define what a cash generating unit is. Okay, just a second, there is some, एक second, I have to restart OneNote एक बार. Just a second. So first, we have a very scary definition at before us. So we'll first understand this definition. Okay, so first we'll understand what a cash generating unit is. So first understand what do we mean by a unit? A unit is a smallest group of identifiable assets. Please write. It's a smallest group of identifiable assets. And cash generating basically means that this group of identifiable assets should be able to generate cash independently of other assets. These smallest group of identifiable assets should be able to generate cash independently of other assets, right? So we'll understand this with the help of an example. Say there is a company called Neptune Tourism, and this company has two divisions. One is bus division and the other is room service division. Now in the bus division, Neptune Tourism has three buses. One is your red bus, blue bus, and yellow bus. So these are the tangible assets of the bus division. Bus division also has intangible assets, which are, say, operating license and say it has road license. Now these are the intangible assets of the bus division. And then there is this room service division. Now in the room service division, Neptune Tourism has, Neptune Tourism owns 20 luxury rooms. That is, it owns and operates 20 luxury rooms, right? Now let us look at the bus division from three angles. We look at the bus division from three angles. First angle, say the bus division did not have any operating license. Say the bus division did not have any operating license. It only has buses. It only has buses. Right? So will buses only be considered cash generating, guys? Will buses only be considered cash generating? Please tell me. Bolo guys, can we generate cash with buses without
Yes.
licenses? Without
Mm,
license?
no,
No, you cannot generate cash from buses without a license. Because without a license,
they
bus
cannot
would
operate.
bus won't be permitted to travel, right? So you can't generate cash with buses only. You need licenses, right? So the bus division, you know, so buses without licenses won't be able to generate any cash, right? Buses without licenses won't be able to generate any cash. Now let us look at the second angle. Say company does not have any buses, it only has licenses. Will licenses only be considered cash generating, guys? Guys, will licenses only be considered cash generating, bolo?
No.
No. Licenses only won't be considered cash generating, right? Because licenses need to be supported by buses to generate cash. Buses need to run on the ground, then only you would be able to generate cash, right? So licenses without buses don't mean anything, right? Licenses without buses won't be able to generate cash. Now third angle, company has both licenses and buses. Now will this combination of five assets be considered a cash generating unit? Will it be able to generate cash, guys? Will it be able to generate cash now? This combo of five assets, this combination of five assets, three buses and two licenses, will it be able
No.
to generate cash? Please tell me.
No. No, I think so because they need human resource.
Hmm? क्या कह रहा है?
Sir, I think it answer would be no because they need human resource to run
So
those
human
buses.
resource is not on your balance sheet, na? Human resource won't is not appearing on the balance sheet, right? So with licenses and buses, you can generate revenue, right? You can generate cash. So together, the combo of these five assets will bring cash to the company. So we may consider it to be a CGU subject to one more condition. And what is that condition? The other condition is that the cash generating capability should be independent of other assets. The cash generating capability of the bus division should be independent of the other assets of Neptune Tourism. So what are the other assets of Neptune Tourism? Let's have a look on the other assets. The other asset is the room service division. Now the room service division has 20 luxury rooms as assets. So guys think, uh, will buses and licenses be able to generate cash independent of these rooms? Guys, can you please tell me? Will the bus division be able to generate cash independent of the rooms? Guys, are they anywhere
Yes.
related? Yes, it will be able to generate cash independent of rooms. Right, cash generating capacity of buses and licenses are fully independent of these rooms. They are not dependent on the rooms at all. So we might consider the bus division. We might consider the bus division, which consists of buses and licenses, as a CGU. Right. So we might consider bus division, which is a combination of buses and licenses, as a CGU, as a cash generating unit. Right. So this is what your cash generating unit is. Now let us understand the definition of cash generating unit that is given in IAS 36. Right. So CGU is defined as the smallest identifiable group of assets. Right. It is defined as the smallest group of identifiable assets. Right. So it's the smallest group of identifiable assets. Now in our example, the identifiable assets are these three buses plus two licenses. Okay. The second part of the definition says that these assets should be able to generate cash independently. These assets should be able to generate cash independently. And yes, these three buses and two licenses together, these three buses and two licenses combined are generating cash independently, right? And the third part of the definition is that the cash flows of the smallest group of identifiable assets should be largely independent of the cash flows generated by the other assets, right? So cash flow is largely independent of the cash flows generated by other assets, right? And our example, the other assets was the room division or the room service division, right? So the bus division, which consists of three buses and two licenses, meets the criteria of a cash generating unit. Guys, are we good? Have we understood this? All of us? Clear?
Yes, sir.
अच्छा देखो. Okay. Now let's come to the next part. Now this is the important part. Now please understand that this CGU, this bus division, this CGU bus division has its own assets and liabilities, right? So buses are the tangible assets of the bus division. Buses are the tangible assets of the bus division. Then licenses are the intangible assets of the bus division. And guys, this bus division might have liabilities as well, right? So this bus division might owe money to petrol pumps on account of diesel, right? So this CGU bus division might have accounts payable as well, which would be a liability of this bus division CGU, right? Okay. So say the carrying value of bus is 22 lakhs. Let's say the carrying value of licenses is 2 lakhs. And let's say carrying value of accounts payable is 1 lakh. Okay. So the carrying value of my bus division CGU would be how much? Carrying value of net assets of bus division CGU would be 21 lakhs. Carrying value of net assets of bus division CGU is 20. No, how much? इसको 20 कितना होगा? 23 लाख. इसको 20 कर देते हैं. ओके. 20 lakhs. 20, 22, 21 lakh. Guys, are we good? Have we understood till now? Any doubts here? Guys, anyone is having any doubt? बोलो कोई जल्दी. जल्दी
No,
करो.
sir.
Good, sir.
Now, please understand that, you know, after a business combination, that is, you know, after Neptune Tourism, acquired some other company, right? After Neptune Tourism acquired some other company, goodwill, will be allocated to the bus division if it would benefit from the synergies of business combination, right? So write this down. If Neptune Tourism acquires some other travel agency.
सर इसमें ट्रैवल एजेंसी की जगह मतलब ऐसी भी कोई कंपनी हो सकती है, जैसे कि
कुछ
सपोज वो बस ही मैन्युफैक्चर कर रही है,
एकदम एकदम कुछ भी हो सकती है, कुछ भी हो सकती है।
मतलब उसी से मिलता जुलता होना चाहिए उस बिजनेस से।
उस मतलब सिनर्जी जनरेट होना चाहिए, ठीक है ना, सिनर्जी जनरेट होना चाहिए चाहे कैसा भी बिजनेस है, ठीक है। सो गुडविल बी विल बी allocated to bus division, which is our CGU, if the bus division if the bus division would benefit from the synergies of business combination, ठीक है। So now let's understand this with an example. Say Neptune Tourism, acquired some other company, right? Neptune Tourism acquired 100% of equity of some other company, say XYZ company, 100% equity of XYZ company by paying uh, $5 lakh, and fair value of net identifiable assets of XYZ company is say $3 lakh, right? Then what is the goodwill in this particular transaction? What is the goodwill in this acquisition? Please tell me. Anil, bata, what is the goodwill in this acquisition? Goodwill is
fair purchase value or fair value.
purchase price minus fair value of
2 लाख।
2 lakh, 2 lakh.
net identifiable asset,
Set.
which is 5 lakh minus 3 lakh, 2 lakhs. Now, this is the goodwill which has been created in this particular transaction. Now, Neptune Tourism feels that the bus division is expected to benefit more from this business combination. Basically, Neptune Tourism feels that bus division's revenues would increase, and its expenses would decrease because of this business combination, right? So basically, Neptune Tourism believes that bus division is expected to benefit more than the room division, right? Bus division's revenue would increase more, and its costs would also increase. Cost would decrease, right? Its cost would decrease as a result of this business combination, right? So what it does is that Neptune Tourism, out of this goodwill of 200,000, what Neptune Tourism does is that it allocates goodwill of 150 to bus division, and say the remaining 50 to the room service division. Now please understand one thing, that the basis of allocation of goodwill require a lot of practical judgment in practice, right? In the real world, allocation of goodwill to CGUs require a lot of practical judgment, and discussion on this is out of scope of our syllabus. See, IAS 36 has a lot of annexures which tell how to allocate goodwill, but those are really complex, and those are basically out of our syllabus, so I won't be dealing into them, right? Even our CPA syllabus, even the CPA syllabus avoids all this, right? The CPA syllabus also does not deal, or even the ACCA syllabus, I don't think so, deals with all of this, right? So we'll also, since it's not part of our syllabus, we are also avoiding the same. So, but please write this down here. The basis of allocation of goodwill requires practical judgment. In practice. Okay. Now, guys, after the allocation of goodwill, how would the net assets of bus division CGU look like? Right. So, net assets of bus division CGU after allocation of goodwill. So, carrying value of buses was how much? कोई लिखा था? 20 lakh. Carrying value of licenses were 2 lakh. Now we'll also report goodwill. Now goodwill is 1,50,000, right? So out of this 2 lakh total goodwill, 150 was allocated to the bus division. So we are reporting it as goodwill here, right? And less accounts payable, which is how much? 1 lakh. So ये कितना हो गया? 20, 20, 23, 50. Okay. So carrying value of net assets, not net identifiable assets. Please understand, carrying value of net assets, not net identifiable assets. Why? Because we are including goodwill here. So that is why I'm saying carrying value of net assets. I'm not saying carrying value of net identifiable assets, right? Why am I saying carrying value of net assets? Because we are considering goodwill as an asset here. So this is 2250. Okay. Now, guys, my carrying value of net assets of bus division after the allocation of goodwill due to business combination is 22,50,000. So, say after 1 year, what happens is that expected synergies are not realized. That is, bus division does not benefit from the business combination. Why so? Say maybe because of pandemic, demand for bus service declined, making it difficult for the bus division to achieve expected revenue and cost savings, right? So since expected synergies were not realized, fair value of the bus division fair value of the bus division, not the fair value of the net assets of the bus division. What am I saying? Fair value of the bus division, not the fair value of the net assets of the bus division. So since expected synergies were not realized, fair value of the bus division went below its carrying value, right? So since expected synergies were not realized, fair value of the bus division, not fair value of the identifiable assets of the bus division, fair value of the bus division declined or went below the carrying value of the bus division. Please write a note here, not fair value of net assets of bus division, but fair value of bus division, or basically market value of bus division, right? Market value that will help you distinguish between uh, distinguish or that will help you to make out the difference between the fair value of bus division and fair value of net assets of bus division. Okay, so since expected synergies were not realized due to the pandemic, fair market value of the bus division went below the carrying value of the bus division, and in such a situation we'll recognize a goodwill impairment. This is the broad idea, guys. This is the broad idea, right? Now, guys, Are we recognizing impairment loss at the goodwill level? Guys, please tell me. Are we recognizing the impairment loss at the goodwill level? Yes or no? Please tell me. We are recognizing the impairment loss at the CGU level, right? At the cash generating unit level, right? We are basically saying that if the fair value of the CGU is less than the carrying value of the CGU, then we recognize a goodwill impairment. So we are recognizing a goodwill impairment not at the goodwill level but at the CGU level. Can you tell me why? We are recognizing a goodwill impairment not at goodwill level but at CGU level, right? Basically, you are comparing the fair value of the CGU and the carrying value of the CGU to recognize a goodwill impairment, right? You are not comparing the fair value and the carrying value of the goodwill to recognize a goodwill impairment. Guys, are you understanding this? Guys, are you understanding this, please?
Yes, sir.
हम लोग जो इम्पेयरमेंट है वो सीजीयू लेवल पे कर रहे हैं, अपने सीजीयू लेवल का फेयर वैल्यू और उसका कैरिंग वैल्यू को कंपेयर कर रहे हैं, सीजीयू का. वी आर नॉट कंपेयरिंग दी fair value of goodwill and book value, or we are not comparing fair value and carrying value of goodwill. We are comparing fair value of CGU and carrying value of the CGU to recognize a goodwill impairment loss. Why so? ऐसा क्यों कर रहे हैं? Why are we doing so? Now please understand, very important point. बहुत डिटेल में जा रहा हूँ, बुक एक बार खोलोगे तो समझ में आएगा कि मैं बहुत डिटेल में गया था मैटर के. See guys, first please understand, it is not possible to calculate market value of goodwill. Guys, can we calculate the market value of goodwill? Bolo, can we calculate
No.
the we cannot calculate the market value of goodwill because goodwill cannot be bought and sold separately. ठीक है ना?
Right.
Since goodwill can't be bought and sold separately, right? We cannot calculate the market value of goodwill. ठीक है ना? Because goodwill cannot be separated from the business, right? So we cannot calculate the market value of goodwill. And the second thing is very important thing, that goodwill does not generate any cash flow. It does not generate any cash flow. That is why we are testing for impairment at the cash generating unit level. We are not testing for impairment at the goodwill level. Now, level 1 का याद है? How did we calculate, how did we check for impairment of property, plant and equipment under IFRS? याद है guys, impairment of asset under impairment of asset using cost model in IFRS. याद है? अब मैं याद दिलाता हूँ. We said that if the carrying value of the asset was greater than the recoverable value of the asset, we said that the asset, the property, plant, equipment is impaired, right? Now I am going to the level 1 discussion on asset impairment. What was recoverable value? It was the higher of A, value in use, B, fair value minus cost to sell, right? So recoverable value was the higher of the two. What was value in use? Present value of future cash flows expected to be generated by the asset, right? So this was how we tested for asset impairment under IFRS using cost model, right? Now guys, please tell me, can we use this model for testing for goodwill impairment at the goodwill level? Can we use this? No, we cannot use this. First reason is, guys, see, we can calculate the carrying value of goodwill. Carrying value of goodwill is what? Basically the purchase price minus fair value of net identifiable assets. But can we calculate the value in use of goodwill? Bolo guys, can we calculate the value in use of goodwill, not asset? Can we calculate the value in use of goodwill? Bolo. Can we calculate the present value of future cash flows that goodwill is expected to generate? Bolo. Guys, can we calculate the present value of future cash flows that goodwill is expected to generate? Yes, no, bol. Anil, Ashay, Kunal, tell me yes or no. Guys, goodwill does not generate any cash flow. So calculating present value of future cash flows expected to be generated by goodwill is out of question, right? So we cannot
Right.
calculate the value in
Goodwill.
use of goodwill, because what is value in use? It's the present value of future cash flows expected to be generated by goodwill. But goodwill does not generate any cash flows, so we can't calculate the value in use of goodwill. And we've already
Goodwill
said that,
can't generate or goodwill alone can't.
huh?
So goodwill can't generate cash flows or goodwill alone can't generate cash flows.
गुडविल अलोन कांट जनरेट कैश फ्लोस ना.
Right.
गुडविल अकेला नहीं कर सकता, ठीक है ना.
Right. Right.
गुडविल अलोन कैनॉट जनरेट कैश फ्लोस. एंड fair value minus cost to sell, as I have already told you, we cannot calculate the market value, fair value of goodwill. Why? Because goodwill is inseparable from business. It cannot be bought and sold separately, so we cannot estimate the fair value of goodwill, right? And guys, since you cannot sell goodwill separately, you cannot sell goodwill separately, it's also not possible to estimate the cost of selling goodwill, right? So this is the reason why we cannot test for impairment at the goodwill level. We have to test for impairment at the CGU level, right? We cannot test for impairment of goodwill at the goodwill level. We will test for goodwill impairment at the CGU level, right? So what did we say? We said that at the time of business combination, goodwill is allocated to CGU, which are expected to benefit from the synergies of business combination. Please write this. At the time of business combination, goodwill is allocated to CGU, which is expected to benefit from the synergy of business combination. ठीक है ना? And if these expected synergies are not realized in future for some reason, right? That is, if the CGU does not benefit from the synergies of business combination, a goodwill impairment is recognized. ठीक है ना? So write this down as well. And if these expected synergies are not realized, that is, if the CGU does not benefit from the synergies of business combination, goodwill impairment is recognized. Now guys, tell me if you have any doubts or not. Bolo. गाइस बोलो, अब मैं क्वेश्चंस कराऊंगा इसके बाद. डू वी हैव एनी डाउट्स अभी तक? गाइस बोलो प्लीज, यस और नो. आशय, अनिल, कुणाल, किसी के कोई डाउट है? आशय बोलो बाबू.
I'm good, sir.
आशय
आ गया सर, आ गया सर.
आ गया मतलब कहीं गया हुआ था?
नहीं नहीं, मतलब समझ आ गया.
ओके. कुणाल, कोई डाउट? कुणाल सुन रहा है?
नहीं. हम्म. ठीक है, ठीक.
So let's do some sums, right? IFRS, please now make a heading IFRS goodwill impairment. Now please understand these rules. Goodwill impairment IFRS. Now if the carrying value of CGU including goodwill is greater than the fair value of CGU or market value of CGU, don't compare this to the. This is not the fair value of the net identifiable assets of the CGU. This is the market value of the CGU, right? This is not the fair value of the net identifiable assets of the CGU, right? So if the carrying value of the CGU is greater than the fair value of the CGU, then goodwill impairment is recognized and impairment loss is recognized. Now, what is, okay, sorry, no. Please understand this. 1 second. This would be the recoverable value of the CGU. I'm sorry. Recoverable value of the CGU. Okay, so an impairment loss is recognized. Right? Now, what is the recoverable value here? It is the higher of value in use of CGU or fair value of CGU minus cost to sell the CGU. Minus cost to sell the CGU. Now, what is the value and use of CGU? It's basically the present value of future cash flows expected to be generated from the CGU. Please write this down. It's the present value of future cash flows expected to be generated from the CGU. Right? So, recoverable value is the higher of value in use or fair value of CGU minus cost to sell the CGU. Now, guys, we could not determine the value in use of goodwill, but we can definitely determine the value in use of CGU. Guys, can we understand this, please? We can determine the value in use of the CGU, but could we determine the value in use of the goodwill? Guys, please tell me. Bolo.
नो सर,
आशय,
मतलब प्रेजेंट वैल्यू तो नहीं, कैश फ्लोज की प्रेजेंट वैल्यू तो निकलेगी नहीं ना, उसमें तो कोई कैश फ्लो भी नहीं होगा गुडविल
उसमें
का.
कैश फ्लो ही नहीं होगा गुडविल में, लेकिन यहाँ पे तो सीजीयू का तो फ्यूचर कैश फ्लोज कुछ ना कुछ वो जनरेट करेगा ही, तो उसकी
हाँ.
प्रेजेंट वैल्यू तो निकल सकती है. ठीक है ना? एंड वी कैन ऑल्सो एस्टिमेट द फेयर वैल्यू ऑफ द सीजीयू, but we are unable to estimate the fair value of goodwill. Why aren't we able to estimate the fair value of goodwill? Because goodwill cannot be sold separately, it cannot be separated from the business, but we can definitely calculate the fair value of CGU. So that is why goodwill impairment is tested at the CGU level, not at the goodwill level. ठीक है? And basically carrying value of CGU क्या है? Please understand. Carrying value of CGU is carrying value of assets of the CGU.
अच्छा सर, एक क्वेश्चन है,
एक
जैसे
बार ये लिखने दे, एक सेकंड. Carrying value of assets of CGU plus carrying value of minus carrying only plus carrying value of goodwill, carrying value of allocated goodwill minus carrying value of liability. हाँ बोल आशा.
जैसे मतलब यहाँ पे तो आईएफआरएस तो बोलता है कि गुडविल को हमें सीजीयू कैश जनरेटिंग यूनिट पे एलोकेट करना है, राइट?
हाँ हाँ
अभी सपोज ऐसा कोई एक्विजिशन हुआ है जिसमें मतलब कंपनी जो सिनर्जी एक्सपेक्ट कर रही है वो आज नहीं कर रही है, सपोज आज से 3 या 4 साल बाद कर रही है, ठीक है, मतलब तो उस केस में मतलब किसको मतलब कैसे एलोकेट होगा? बिकॉज गुडविल तो मतलब ऐसे एसेट को होगा ना जो मतलब अभी तक कैश जनरेट कर ही नहीं रहा है अभी।
हाँ, तो उसका प्रेजेंट वैल्यू जनरेट कर देगा ना, वो लोग प्रेजेंट वैल्यू को एलोकेट कर देगा, जो बाद में सिनर्जी आने वाला होगा ना 3-4 साल बाद, उसका
हम्म।
प्रेजेंट वैल्यू को ये लोग कैलकुलेट करके कुछ ना कुछ एलोकेट करेगा ही करेगा, ठीक है ना। ऐसा हो ही नहीं सकता कि नहीं करे, करेगा तो सही, चाहे प्रेजेंट वैल्यू कुछ यूज कर ले, वैसा कोई फंडा बैठा दे, ठीक है ना। क्योंकि दीज आर एक्सपेक्टेड, बार बार मैं क्या वर्ड यूज कर रहा हूँ, एक्सपेक्टेड। तो जब मैं एक्सपेक्टेड बोल रहा हूँ तो मतलब वो फॉरवर्ड लुकिंग ही हो गए, ठीक है ना,
हम्म।
तो वो फॉरवर्ड लुकिंग ही हो गए, ठीक है। बट ऐसा कोई चीज पे कोई मतलब टू द बेस्ट ऑफ माई नॉलेज कोई लिटरेचर आईएफआरएस में नहीं है, ठीक है ना, ऐसा कोई लिटरेचर आईएफआरएस में नहीं है। और जब मैं एक्सपेक्टेड बोल रहा हूँ वो बेसिकली फॉरवर्ड लुकिंग ही होगी, ठीक है ना।
हम्म।
ओके, नाउ एक और लास्ट पॉइंट लिखो यहाँ पे गाइस, इफ ओके, so if the carrying value of the CGU is greater than the recoverable value of the CGU and impairment loss is recognized, तो impairment loss क्या होगा, please write that down, impairment loss equals carrying value of the CGU minus recoverable value of the CGU. और goodwill, this loss would be recognized in the income statement and goodwill will be reported at its carrying value minus impairment loss. That is basically goodwill will be reported at recoverable value, right? Goodwill will be reported at carrying value minus impairment loss, and carrying value minus impairment loss is nothing but your recoverable value in the balance sheet. Now, very important point, guys. Now, if impairment loss exceeds the reported value of goodwill, बहुत important point है, if impairment loss exceeds the reported value of goodwill, then impairment loss would first be applied to goodwill. ये लिख लो प्लीज, अब मैं लिखूंगा नहीं. Then impairment loss would first be applied to goodwill, and once goodwill is reduced to zero, then the remaining loss is allocated to all other non-cash assets in the CGU on a pro rata basis. Please write this down. If the
फिर से।
impairment loss is greater than the reported value of goodwill, then impairment loss would first be recognized to goodwill, and once goodwill is reduced to zero, then the remaining loss is allocated to all other non-cash assets in the CGU on a pro rata basis. ठीक है, अभी एग्जाम्पल करके समझते हैं, राइट, वील अंडरस्टैंड दिस विद एन एग्जाम्पल. ओके, बुक वैल्यू ऑफ CGU, अकाउंट्स रिसीवेबल कर लें 125, ठीक है. प्रॉपर्टी प्लांट एंड मशीनरी कर लो कितना करें, चलो पहले गुडविल कर लेते हैं. गुडविल एलोकेटेड इसको हो रहा है 25,000, ओके. एंड प्रॉपर्टी प्लांट एंड इक्विपमेंट को कर लो 25, हाउ मच हो गया, इसको कितना मारे, बोलो कुछ मन से, अब हर चीज हम ही बनाए.
50 कर दो।
इसको कर दो 700, 7,75,000, right. So carrying value of net assets of the CGU is 9,25,000, and say recoverable value of the CGU is 7,50,000. So guys, carrying value of the CGU is greater than recoverable value. We will recognize an impairment loss, right? And the impairment loss shall equal carrying value minus recoverable value, which is 925 minus 9,25,000 minus 7,50,000, which is 175. Now this is my impairment loss. Now this 1,75,000 impairment loss would first be allocated to goodwill. Right, goodwill is reported at 25,000 in my balance sheet. Right, so my goodwill will reduce from 25,000 to 0. Right, so goodwill will absorb $25,000 worth of impairment loss. Right, goodwill will absorb this much loss, and the remaining loss of 150, what will we do with this remaining loss of 150? Goodwill will be reduced from 25,000 to 0. Basically, goodwill will absorb losses up to 25,000. What will we do with the remainder loss of 150? Bolo? Guys, so please write down the remainder impairment loss of 150, 1,50,000 would be allocated to all other non-cash assets of the CGU on a pro rata basis. Please write this down. The remaining or the remainder impairment loss of 1,50,000 would be allocated to all other non-cash assets of the CGU on a pro rata basis. ठीक है. Guys, are we good? समझ में आया ये? आशय?
सर ये 175,000 वाला एक बार ब्रेकअप बता दो.
ये 25,000 175 में 25 का क्या होगा? 25 से गुडविल घट जाएगा. ठीक है, तो गुडविल अब बैलेंस शीट में हो जाएगा. इट वुड बी रिड्यूस टू 0. ठीक है ना, गुडविल वुड बी रिड्यूस टू 0. गुडविल विल absorb losses up to its carrying value. और ये जो बाकी 1.5 लाख का impairment loss है, that would be absorbed by your accounts receivable and your property, plant and machinery. ठीक है ना, on a pro rata basis. अब
सर नॉन कैश एसेट्स क्या होता है?
जो कैश नहीं है. ठीक है ना,
मतलब ओके, पीपीई वगैरह लैंड, उस लैंड वगैरह भी आएगी.
हो गया तेरा, अकाउंट्स रिसीवेबल हो गया तेरा, ये इन्वेंट्री हो गया, वो सब नॉन कैश. नॉन करंट नहीं, नॉन कैश बोल रहा हूँ. ठीक है ना, नॉन करंट होता तो अकाउंट रिसीवेबल बोलता, प्रॉपर्टी प्लांट इक्विपमेंट बोलता, नॉन कैश बोल.
ये 150,000 से प्लांट प्रॉपर्टी उससे वो घट जाएगा.
उतना अकाउंट्स रिसीवेबल और पीपीएम से घट जाएगा.
अच्छा,
बट वो एक्चुअल कैलकुलेशन सिलेबस में नहीं है, तो मैं उसमें ज्यादा घुसूंगा भी. ठीक है ना, कि कैसे कितना से घटेगा, दैट्स नॉट अ पार्ट ऑफ आवर सिलेबस. अपन दिमाग नहीं लगाएंगे, क्योंकि वैसे ही वी नीड टू नो अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स. अननेसेसरी उसमें नहीं घुसे जो है नहीं. चलो नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. ओके, डू दिस क्वेश्चन प्लीज. बुक वैल्यू ऑफ एसेट्स ऑफ सीजीयू. ठीक है, अकाउंट्स रिसीवेबल 500,000, property plant and machinery 600,000, goodwill 300,000, accounts payable 100,000. So book value of net assets हो गया कितना? 14-13 लाख. ठीक है, now butter chicken, recoverable value is 14 lakh. So my नहीं recoverable value is तेरा सॉरी रिकवरेबल वैल्यू इसमें क्वेश्चन में कुछ गलत दिया हुआ है, एक सेकंड रुक, मैं चेक करता हूँ।
सर इसका केसलेट कैसे आएगा?
आएगा, वो भी डिस्कस कर लेंगे। रिकवरेबल वैल्यू ऑफ सीजीयू तेरा है 12 lakhs, ठीक है। सो बुक वैल्यू और कैरिंग वैल्यू इज ग्रेटर देन योर रिकवरेबल वैल्यू, सो इम्पेयरमेंट लॉस इज रिकॉग्नाइज्ड। इम्पेयरमेंट लॉस कितना आएगा? 1 lakh का, दैट इज कैरिंग वैल्यू माइनस रिकवरेबल वैल्यू, राइट। नाउ in the balance sheet, what will happen? Guys, tell me what will happen in the balance sheet. We will recognize an impairment loss of 1 lakh in the income statement. Okay, this 1 lakh impairment loss would go in the income statement. In the balance sheet, reported value of goodwill would reduce by 1 lakh. That is, reported value of goodwill would become 2 lakhs, right? It will reduce from 3 lakhs to 2 lakhs. Okay. The reported value of goodwill would reduce by 1 lakh, that is from 3 lakhs to 2 lakhs. ठीक है guys, are we good? बोलो, any doubts here?
सर ये भी ऑडिट होता है मतलब साल में एक बार किसी भी कंपनी का, तो जब गुडविल इम्पेयरमेंट का टेस्टिंग होता है तो एक एक का अलग अलग करते हैं क्या ये लोग ऑडिटर्स होते हैं?
अरे वो लोग का जो मन आता है वो लोग कर लेते हैं। जैसा मैनेजमेंट बोलता है रिपोर्ट करने को प्रॉफिट, वैसे मैनेज हो जाता है सब चीज। ये तो सब सब्जेक्टिव है आशय, देखना क्या ये, अरे किसी यूनिट को सेपरेट करना कोई इतना इजी है क्या जितना मैं बता रहा हूँ?
हाँ मतलब जैसे अमेजोन जैसी कंपनी है वो तो बहुत बड़ी है ना, उसमें
हाँ तो
कहाँ ढूंढते
कैसे करेगा, कर ही नहीं सकता। तो ये जो इम्पेयरमेंट है, इट्स अ बेसिकली अ सोर्स ऑफ नेट इनकम मैनिपुलेशन, है ना। दैट इज वाई तो इनकम टैक्स बोलता है आई वोंट अलाउ दिस एक्सपेंस, ठीक है ना। इट्स नॉट टैक्स डिडक्टेबल बिकॉज इट्स अ इट्स अ वेरी इट्स अ पेंडोरास बॉक्स ऑफ नेट इनकम मैनिपुलेशन, ठीक है ना। तो आज मेरे को अगर अपना मतलब मतलब सी, आज मेरे को अगर कोई रीजन की वजह से, जैसे सपोज करो क्या हुआ कि ओल्ड मैनेजमेंट इज रिपोर्ट रिप्लेस्ड बाय द न्यू मैनेजमेंट, तो जस्ट इन December 31st, जहाँ यूएस में अकाउंटिंग ईयर 31st कैलेंडर ईयर अकाउंटिंग ईयर सेम होता है, तो सपोज कर 20 दिसंबर को ओल्ड मैनेजमेंट इज रिप्लेस्ड बाय द न्यू मैनेजमेंट। न्यू मैनेजमेंट क्या करेगा, बोलेगा इम्पेयरमेंट लॉस बुक्स में रिकॉग्नाइज करा देगा उसी साल में, ठीक है। और फिर वो जनवरी में बोलेगा देखो ओल्ड मैनेजमेंट कितना गंदा नेट इनकम पोस्ट करके चला गया, अब हमको ही सब ठीक करना पड़ेगा, ठीक है। तो ये सब जो चीज है ना, ये सब दिस इज वेरी 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 सब्जेक्टिव, ठीक है ना, वेरी वेरी सब्जेक्टिव। तो ये दैट इज वाई इनकम टैक्स बोलता है कि नो 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 नो, तुम लॉस बुक कर लो जो मर्जी कर लो, बट आई वोंट, दिस वोंट बी अ टैक्स डिडक्टेबल एक्सपेंस, राइट। मैं बोला गया इस पे हम तुम्हारा टैक्स लायबिलिटी थोड़ी घटा देंगे, तुम तो ये कुछ भी तुम्हारा मन जैसा मन किया तुम वैसा कर लो, ठीक है आशय। चलो अभी यूएस गैप, अभी IFRS में देयर वाज एन वन स्टेप अप्रोच, in IFRS there was a one step approach in IFRS, but in US GAAP there is a two step approach. How was, how did we have a one step approach in IFRS? Basically we compared the carrying value of the CGU to the recoverable value of the CGU, and if the carrying value was greater than the recoverable value, we said that the goodwill is impaired. Okay. So there was a one step approach, but in US GAAP we follow a two step approach. कुणाल अनिल मेरे को बोलो, आशय को छोड़ के तो कोई रिस्पॉन्स ही नहीं दे रहा। कुणाल अनिल दोनों समझ में आ रहा है बात?
जी।
तो अनिल अनिल फिर सो गया।
कल कहाँ गया था, सो गया था क्या?
आज भी फिर सो गया।
कल कहाँ था, बोला ना, बोला नहीं उसने।
मैसेज भेजा कि सर मैम थक गया, हम सो गए। हेलो अनिल फिर सो गया। चलो हम भी जल्दी क्लास खत्म करें, हम भी सो जाएगा। ठीक है, ओके। सो इन यूएस गैप वी फॉलो अ टू स्टेप अप्रोच. So in US GAAP at the time of acquisition, goodwill is allocated to reporting unit. अभी देखो नाम चेंज हो गया फ्रॉम CGU टू reporting unit. Now very loosely speaking, CGU and reporting unit are same. ठीक है ना? Very loosely speaking, CGU and reporting unit are same. What CGU is in IFRS, you can loosely think that the same is reporting unit under US GAAP. ठीक है ना? So at the time of acquisition, goodwill is allocated to reporting unit, and reporting unit is more or less like a CGU. And testing for impairment is conducted at the reporting unit level. Right, just like testing for impairment under IFRS was done at the CGU level, in US GAAP testing for impairment is done at the reporting unit level. ठीक है ना? So the first step, please write down. First step क्या है? First step is we check whether impairment exists. Please write this down. We check whether impairment exists. How would we check this? If the carrying value of the reporting unit, including allocated goodwill, is greater than the fair value of the reporting unit, not the fair value of net identifiable assets of the reporting unit, but the fair value of the reporting unit, then impairment exists. Then impairment exists, right? And in the second step, please note, once it has been established that impairment exists, the loss is measured. So in the second step, we calculate the amount of impairment loss. In the second step, we calculate the amount of impairment loss.
ये तो कुछ देखा देखा सा लग रहा है।
ये वही है, सेम अपना एसेट इम्पेयरमेंट जैसा ही है इन लेवल 1. We calculate the amount of impairment loss. Impairment loss is what? So we'll write this down. Impairment loss is carrying value of goodwill minus implied value of goodwill. Now what is implied value of goodwill? कोई idea? Please write this down. Implied value of the goodwill. Implied value of goodwill is the value of goodwill on the date of test for impairment. Implied value of goodwill Implied value of goodwill is the value of goodwill on the date of test for impairment. Here the catchword is date of test for impairment. ठीक है ना? So what we do to calculate implied goodwill is that we look at the fair value of the reporting unit on the date of test of impairment. On the date of test for impairment, and from this we would deduct the fair value of net identifiable assets. When I say net identifiable assets, we won't include the carrying value of goodwill here. Not include carrying value of goodwill because we are speaking of identifiable assets. Not include carrying value of goodwill. Let me write this down. Okay, एक सेकंड रुको. अनिल सो गया ये, बहुत मेहनत कर रहा ऑफिस में. तुम लोग कितना बजे आए ऑफिस से? आशय, कुणाल?
मेरा तो सर हफ्ते में 3 दिन वर्क फ्रॉम होम रहता है.
ओके ओके. नॉट इंक्लूड. कुणाल कितना बजे आया? हेलो,
कहाँ से?
ऑफिस से.
मेरा ऑफिस पास है सर. मैं सुबह जल्दी चला जाता हूँ 8 बजे, 4:30 बजे आ जाता हूँ. लेकिन मैं फिर 2 घंटा कुछ 8 किलोमीटर वॉकिंग कर रहा था.
काम पता है तेरा तो रोज कर रहा तुम. चलो, सो वी कैलकुलेट द इम्प्लाइड गुडविल और कैरिंग वैल्यू ऑफ गुडविल से इम्प्लाइड गुडविल को लेस कर देते हैं. दैट वुड बी माय इम्पेयरमेंट लॉस. ठीक है ना? अच्छा करता है कुणाल, भागता है, फिट रहेगा एकदम मस्त बढ़िया. 8 किलोमीटर भाग कैसे लेता?
सर भागता नहीं, वॉकाथॉन है. उतना भाग नहीं पाता, लेकिन थोड़ा ब्रिस्क वॉकिंग करता हूँ.
बहुत अच्छा है, एकदम बॉडी के लिए बहुत अच्छा है. चलो,
मेरा तो एक के चक्कर में सर जिम विम सब छूट गया.
अरे मैं तो दिसंबर 1 को 2 दिन के लिए जिम गया था और 3 दिसंबर को छोड़ दिया. मैं बोला भाई मेरे से ना होगा.
सर
मेरा
यहाँ पर जिम नहीं है सर, इसीलिए मतलब थोड़ा सा वो कर रहा हूँ. जब शिफ्ट करूंगा फिर जिम जाऊंगा. यहाँ पास में है नहीं जिम एक्चुअली में.
ऊपर पूरा पैक्ड है, अभी टाइम ही नहीं मिलता है जिम में जाने का.
मैं तो घर में ही थोड़ा सा कोशिश करता हूँ कि सिट वो कर लूँ, स्पॉट जॉगिंग बस. चलो, सो XYZ इज एन एनर्जी कंपनी. ये सॉल्व कर लेते हैं. लास्ट क्वेश्चन फॉर द डे. XYZ is an energy company. It had purchased a division few years ago. The name of the division is Fire, and the mission of this Fire division was to develop a new energy source using cold fusion. Now, many experiments have failed. Many experiments of the Fire division have failed, and XYZ is wondering if the value of the fire should be written down. ठीक है ना? So, estimated future cash flows of fire division is 700 million. Okay. XYZ has just received a purchase offer for fire division of 550 million. ठीक है ना? So XYZ has just received a purchase offer for fire division of 550 million. So that is basically fair value of fire division is 550 million. Okay, now we'll write the net assets of fire division. Net assets. ठीक है. कैरिंग वैल्यू ऑफ नेट एसेट्स. तो देखो, कैश 30, अकाउंट्स रिसीवेबल 220, पीपीई 2500, गुडविल is 300, accounts payable 140, notes payable 2300. तो ये कैलकुलेट करें 220 30, ओके कितना आएगा 2500 2800 3050 3050 माइनस 2300 कितना हो गया 750 माइनस 140 750 माइनस 140 कितना क्या 610. Carrying value of net assets of fire division is 610. ठीक है. Now fair value is 550, right? Fair value is 550. So carrying value. Now we are checking for goodwill impairment in US GAAP. ठीक है ना? So it's a two-step approach. First step is to check for impairment. So the first step is we compare the carrying value of the reporting unit including the goodwill. So carrying value of reporting unit including goodwill is 610, which is greater than the fair value of the reporting unit, which is 550. So goodwill impairment exists. There is a goodwill impairment. So in the second step, we'll calculate the impairment loss, which is how much? Which is basically the carrying value of goodwill, which is 300 less implied goodwill. Now implied goodwill is the goodwill at the date of test for impairment. ठीक है ना? So we'll calculate implied goodwill separately. Okay, so fair value of fire division on the date of test of impairment is 550. Right? Please write this down. Fair value of fire division on the date of test of impairment is 550. Right? Okay, I'm not giving you one. No, I've given you all the details. And what is the fair value of net identifiable assets of fire division? Guys, look at this detail here. Tell me the fair value of net. Fair value, say carrying value equals fair value here. Right, carrying value equals your fair value here for the sake of simplicity. Now tell me what is the fair value or carrying value, because fair value equals carrying value here. I've made this simpler for you.
310.
Yes. Basically, we won't include goodwill because we are speaking of net identifiable assets. Right. So 220 plus 610 minus 300. That would be 310. Kunal, समझ में आया ये? We are said that fair value equals to carrying value. So fair value of net identifiable assets of fire division is basically 310.
310 ना.
हाँ. So 550 minus 310 हो गया 240. So your implied goodwill is 240. ठीक है. So carrying value of goodwill is 300. Implied goodwill is 240. तो impairment loss कितना होगा? Impairment loss होगा 60 का, right? Which is carrying value of goodwill, which is 300 minus implied goodwill 240. We'll recognize a impairment loss of 60 in the income statement, right? And the carrying value of the goodwill will be reduced by 60, right? So carrying value of the goodwill will reduce by the amount of impairment loss, that is 60. So carrying value of goodwill is 300 minus 60, which is 240, and 240 is nothing but your implied goodwill. So carrying value of goodwill would be 300, which was the reported value of goodwill before the test for impairment. 300 was the carrying value of the goodwill before test of impairment, minus impairment loss 60. So carrying value is 240, and this 240 is nothing but implied goodwill. ठीक है guys, समझ में आ गया? All good? कि कोई doubt?
Yes.
जी सर.
ये बहुत मैं खोद के बताने का कोशिश किया, बुक में ऐसे नहीं दिया हुआ है। वो लोग बहुत चीज़ों को CGU PGU को तो CFA इंस्टीट्यूट